Okay, so we left it off where we changed the view as to where we actually add the address. Now in our checkout, what we want to do is actually display a few different addresses, or at least a few that we can choose from, and then use that in our checkout process, right? And then also use maybe just an add address button to show a field for the address where we don't necessarily need to show this right off the bat, unless, of course, they don't have an address. But I already have a few addresses in here, and I'm at the checkout point, so I should be able to at least add those addresses now, or select one of them. All right, so what I'm going to do is then I'm going to go into my views, and I want to import all of these addresses. So I already have user address imported right here. So in my views and checkout, I'm just going to go in here and say current addresses equals to, oops, just going to paste user address dot objects dot filter and user equals to request dot user. Right, so let's make sure that our model itself is aligned with that, and of course it is right here. So now this is going to give us a list of all of our user addresses, right? So all of our current addresses. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and in our context, we're going to add this in here. Put some commas. All right, now let's go to the checkout template, checkout.html, and I'm going to go current addresses. So if I refresh in here, I'll see that I have a few different addresses that are current. So these are ones that I should be able to choose from, right? They shouldn't be something that I just randomly have. It's just like ones that I can actually choose from. So what I'll do is I'm going to actually make, on our models, I'm going to make a one-line address. So define get address. This is going to be an instance method, and it's going to return a string, one string of the address. So first off would be the street, and then we would do after that, after the street, we would do city, state, country, zip. So I'm just going to returning this as a string. So self.address, self.city, self.state, self.country, and self.zip. Let's see, we have 5 here, 5 here. Okay, so we might actually change this later, but I just want this one line street address so I can use it in my template. And now I'll go a for loop, so for addresses or address in current addresses in for, and then I'll do address dot get address. And I made a spelling error. Global name state is not correct, so I typed out state. So let's look in our model, or it should have been state. So it should be self.state, and zip should be self.zip code. So just double checking those. All right. Now refresh in here. It says state is not defined. Oh, self.state. There's the issue. Another issue there. And there we go. So now we've got our addresses here that are actually looking okay. Now I'm going to put them into as, first off, I'm going to set them as list items just so we can see them. All right, so now we have our list items here. And then I'm going to add an ID of the address ID. So address.id. All right, so now these list items are actually, we are able to use the ID part to eventually change something about them. Okay, so now I've got these addresses, and so let's actually separate the two sides. So one side will be current addresses, the other side would be add address. So we'll do div class equals column small 6, and end off this div. Now, I also want to put this if clause of current addresses, so if they even exist, I'll put an if in here. Otherwise, this div class would go away, which is something we would want, because if they don't have any addresses, all they should see is add new addresses. And the same thing for address form. So if the address form is actually there, then we'll show it. Otherwise, we won't. So that will be true when we actually go. Whoops, what did I? Oh, here we go. If notice I had this syntax error. Okay, so now it looks a little bit cleaner. And in here, I could say h3 current addresses, or you could call them saved. And then we could say add one. Add new shipping address. All right. One more thing that we might want to do is change this to get shipping addresses. So shipping, or sorry, not get shipping, just get regular address is fine. But we will want to have one called get shipping addresses. So I'm going to, get billing addresses. We're going to just say the default address is a shipping address, right? So as we see here. But get billing address will be another set of addresses. So get billing. Actually, this would be a set of billing addresses, not an instance method. So that would require us to make a model manager for this. So we're going to do that. We'll do objects equals to user address manager. And now I have to create this. And right above, I'll put it above new state. Actually, no, I'll leave that right there. I'll just do class shipping manager address, and it's models.manager. And here we're going to define get billing addresses, and it's going to take in self, and we're going to return super, the super class of super address manager, or user address manager, excuse me, and the instance of self. And then we're going to filter billing equals to true. So this is going to get all the billing addresses. From here, we would then have to filter the user billing addresses, or I could just do user here and then do filter user equals to user. So now that we have this, we can go ahead and test this out. So let's go into our orders. Notice that I have the object selected here. And this is a little bit different than what we did in marketing. Right? In marketing, we have a query set, and then we had our manager query sets based off of the main query set up here. So our managers are based off of that, where right now we're just using a manager based off of itself and filtering things. So to use this, we go back into our orders, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy this right here, paste it in, and say get billing addresses, and we'll keep our user there. And let's go ahead and print these. Oops. Print, call this billing addresses. And oops, I spelled filter incorrectly on our manager for accounts. So filter right here. Okay. Refresh, and we don't see anything, but if I see my printout, I see that it looks like I have 5 different ones. So that should mean that, I believe that's what it is. If we look at our view, yeah, that's our most recent print. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this address added print, and we will go back and refresh in here. And there we go. So we now have billing addresses. So let's go ahead and add this in as with our context. And then we will go into our checkout. And we're going to go div class equals to row. Just going to create a brand new row here. And I'm going to essentially copy the current address as one, paste that in here. And instead of current addresses now, billing addresses. Everything else can stay the same. refresh. Now we see that, well, it looks like we have billing addresses. One of them is not showing up in billing addresses as well as saved addresses, right? So we'll have to kind of work with this a little bit, because add address should be add new address, not just add shipping address, but add new address, because we're going to have billing addresses, but also just general add new addresses, because it could be billing or it could be shipping. Doesn't really matter. We're going to say the default is shipping. So we might actually have to make some sort of adjustment here to make this make a little bit more sense. But we have our saved, well, we could call these shipping addresses. Now, not saved, but shipping addresses and billing addresses, or select one. And then we will have to do that. So to make this work, we're going to have to make these into like radio buttons. So they're going to be a part of a form that's going to work with the actual form that would then be sent in with our payment. So after we have shipping and billing, our payment is going to be fairly straightforward, right? So we've got shipping, billing, and then all we need is payment, because we already have all their other information. So what we need to do is associate the shipping and billing and then payment to one thing, one order essentially, and then we're going to send that. And then once we do that, then we'll just delete everything, like all the cart information and stuff like that, and mark the order as complete. So what we need to do now is turn these actually into shipping, and then also put them into some sort of form. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to move this add new addresses to a completely different area. I'm just going to put it at the very top for now. And then I'm going to use this other side to being like, I'm going to put this all in one div and then this into another div that would be on the side, or we'll have it loaded in somewhere else. But basically I want to put this all separate from this form, because we see that there's a form in here. I don't want to have a form outside of a form. I want to have a form covering this stuff. So I'm just going to say form method equals to post action. We don't have an action yet because we don't know what we're going to be doing with this quite yet. And I'll do CSRF token. And then we're going to put this form all the way down past the billing. And eventually it'll be where the credit card information is too. So I can just copy this row. And I'm just going to say H3 credit card info. All right, and notice that the address moves to the side, so I'm just going to call this pull right, or tell it to pull right. So then everything else goes back to where it was. So right now, this add new address is pulled off to the side, and this is all a brand new form, and it's all fitting in here. So now what we need to do is convert these different addresses, not new address, but current and billing. We need to convert these into like a radio type button. So radio button being like it's related to like when you do a checkout. Like this is a check mark. What we want is radio buttons for each set. So we'll jump into our shipping addresses. And we'll go input type equals to radio. We're going to give it a name. So the name is what we want to actually call it. And I'll call it current address. Or let's actually call it shipping address, because that would probably make more sense. Shipping address. And then we're going to give it a value of the ID right here. Let's take a look at what that looks like. So we got the value right there. The value is in there. So what we now need to do is just right next to it, add the address. And we can keep it into list elements if we'd like. So list element. Let's space this out, and I'm going to get rid of this one. So now we've got it here. Well, the list element probably doesn't make any sense, so let's get rid of that. But we do want to have a break at the end. Okay. So now we've got the shipping addresses, and this exact same thing can work for our billing addresses. So let's just paste it down here. And instead of the name being shipping address, we'll say billing address. All right. So there's still a few things, of course, we need to work on, like this alignment and stuff. But so now we have shipping address and billing. So if we change any of these, they will change, right? So whichever one we end up selecting is the one we're actually gonna end up using for the shipping address. So now we might want to start thinking of, well, is this going to be our default shipping? Is this going to be our default billing? And stuff like that. And then also whether or not this address is active. We might want to make it inactive, or we might want to delete it completely. And then we want to add in our credit card information. So that's going to be coming from Stripe. It's not really going to actually come from our own server, with the exception of a few things. But this is where we'll stop for now, and then we'll come back and kind of pick up on those other things. All right, see you in the next one.